Hey gang, it is Friday night. At the time of this recording, it's about 7 o'clock, so I know it's not our normal 8:30 or first thing in the morning time frame, but I am here, and so we're going to throw this out there. This is Revelation chapter 12, so we're going to kind of jump in here. We're going to walk through this together, Revelation 12. So to this point, God's plans have been revealed, and Satan's schemes are beginning to be unmasked. We're shown what he has been after since the dawn of time. So his plans include eradication of all the believers of the one true God, unification of the world under one government, one leader, and the adoration of the entire human race. Here is Revelation chapter 12, verse 1. It says, Then I witnessed in heaven an event of great significance, and I saw a woman clothed with sun, the moon beneath her feet, and a crown of the 12 stars on her head. This is a sign of something else. This is not exactly as it appears here. The woman that this is talking about is actually the nation of Israel. She represents the nation of Israel, and she's clothed with the sun, the moon, and a crown of 12 stars, which is the 12 tribes. All of these things dignify, or the dignity that clothes the nation, even though they haven't lived up to that standard. Israel still belongs to God. It does kind of call back to the dream that Joseph had in Genesis chapter 37 when he saw the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowing down before him, his mom and his dad and his 11 brothers. And so it seems kind of similar to that. We learn more about her in verse 2. She was pregnant. So again, Genesis 3, the seed of the woman is the one that will crush the head of the serpent or the beast or the snake or Satan. She was pregnant and she cried out because of the labor pains and the agony of giving birth. Verse 3, it says, Then I witnessed in heaven another significant event. I saw a red dragon, and this represents Satan. And this red dragon has 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns. And each one of these are symbols of earthly power. And we find out that he is the cause of the woman's suffering. Verse 4 says his tail swept away 1/3 of the stars in the sky. And so this is a recount of the fall of Satan, of Lucifer from heaven when he took 1/3 of the angels with him. His tail swept away 1/3 of the angels in the sky, and he threw them to the earth, and he stood in front of the woman as she was about to give birth, ready to devour her baby as soon as it was born. Herod was the tool of the devil during that day when Jesus was born. He found out for the wise men where Jesus was, and he went and had all the babies 2 and under in Bethlehem killed. He didn't kill Jesus because he had escaped the edge of the sword. Verse 5, she gave birth to a son who was to rule all nations with an iron rod. Jesus was born to destroy the works of the devil. And before Jesus, we're going to see that demons, disease, disaster, and death all flee before him. He will rule with an iron rod. And the woman fled into the wilderness where God had prepared a place to care for her for 1,260 days. 1,260 days, we said the other day, was 3.5 years if we use the biblical calendar of 360 days. And so God has prepared a place for that remnant, for the nation of Israel during that second half of the Great Tribulation. So then we move on to the war section here in verse 7, and it says, Then there was war in a very unusual place. It says there was a war in heaven. Not maybe where you expected, but it's why we read in Revelation 21 that God created a new heaven and a new earth because Satan has defiled them both. Think about this. Sin originated not in Adam and Eve in the garden, but sin originated with Lucifer. I dropped my pen, y'all. I'm back. Sin originated with Lucifer in heaven. And so God creates a new heaven and a new earth. There was a war in heaven. Verse 8 says, And as you would expect, the dragon lost the battle, and he and his angels were forced out of heaven. Ephesians 6 verse 12 tells us reminds us, I guess, that we battle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities of darkness. And so the dragon loses the battle and he's forced out of heaven. Verse 9, he says, this great dragon, the ancient serpent, called the devil or Satan. And so we have 4 terms for the devil right here, right? We have the great dragon, the ancient serpent, the devil or Satan. We're covering all the bases here. The one, check it out, deceiving the whole world. He was thrown down to earth with his angels. The great deception, the deceiver, is Satan, and he has deceived the whole world into thinking that he is the Messiah, or he is the one who is the answer to their prayers, the one who can solve their problems, when in actuality he is the antithesis of that. The cool thing to note is that the battle in heaven doesn't last long, because Satan may be mighty, but he's not almighty. If there's a preacher out there watching that's a good phrase. You should think about using that. Satan may be mighty, but he is not almighty. Verse 10 tells us, Then I heard a loud voice shouting across the heavens. And what we're going to get is a proclamation about the Savior, Satan, and the saints. Again, 3 points. They're all alliterated. If you're going to preach it, there you go. It would be a good one. And so he, down here in verse 10, where does it say? For the accuser of our brothers and sisters has been thrown down to earth. He is the constant accuser. If you have an interest and you haven't already seen it or were there with us, we did a sermon series a couple of weeks ago when Satan attacks, or when the devil attacks, and we talked about the devil as the accuser. That would be a good thing to go back and watch. Verse 11 says, And they defeated him by the blood of the Lamb and by their testimony. I should highlight both of those. They defeated him by the blood of the Lamb and their testimony. The way I memorized this verse, and the word of their testimony. I think it's interesting to know that they defeated the great dragon, the Antichrist, the devil. They defeated him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of the testimony. Neither of those two things were their own. It was their testimony, but it was their testimony about what God had done for them by the blood of the Lamb. Pretty interesting. So when you jump down into verse 12, it says, But terror will come on the earth and the sea. And we already know, we've seen, remember when Jesus was standing with 1 foot in the ocean and 1 foot on the land, we've already seen that he has dominion in all of these areas. And so Satan has been cast down. The devil has come down to you in great anger, knowing that he has little time. So by this point in Revelation, Satan has just a little bit of time left. And so if you can imagine, like a caged animal at the zoo, he is hot. He is mad. He's looking to vent his anger on the people on the earth. Think about this. Since the beginning, Satan has had access to God. If you think about Job, when Satan goes to God and says, Hey, have you considered your servant? Job and Satan, or God says, Have you considered my servant Job? And Satan says, Well, yeah, but he's so blessed by you and he's got all these things that you've done good for him. There's no way he's going to turn his back on you. Satan goes to him and talks to him about Joshua, the high priest, and he talks about, his spiteful tales about the faults in people, because he is the accuser of the brethren. But now, at this point in Revelation, we find that he has been cast down to earth, and he no longer has that access to be able to go be the accuser of the brethren before God, because he has been banished, he's been dealt with, and he has been locked out. Verse 13, when the dragon realized that he had been thrown down to earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. And so again, he goes after God's representation of believers on the earth. But she ran away from him like a great eagle, so she could fly to the place prepared in the wilderness. This is interesting. So there she would be cared for and protected from the dragon for a time, times, and half a time. What does that mean? Well, we said a while ago, was it 1,260 days? I think was that, if my math was correct, 1,260? Yeah, 1,260 days, time, times, and half a time. Whoops, I'm showing that to the wrong phone. Time, times, and half a time is suspiciously like 3.5 years. 1,260 days. There she would be cared for and protected from the dragon for that last 3.5 3.5 years. And so then we see a couple of more things. We see Satan just really kind of throw in a hissy fit. And so here's what we know. As believers, we know, we rest, we understand that Satan cannot win. And just as the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, so enduring tribulation and persecution will drive many into the arms of the Lord Jesus Christ. I want to read you one thing from one of my commentaries, and then we're going to be done. This is from a book called Exploring Revelation. Oddly enough, the copyright for this book, the first printing, was like in 1960 or something. One of these was 1919. And it's interesting what these guys write, and then what we see in the news today, forget about it. Okay, so here's what he says. What can Satan do with the likes of these? Lock them up in prison and they convert their jailers. Torture them and they become partakers of Christ's suffering and thereby heirs to a great reward. Martyr them and they go straight to be with Christ. Turn them loose and they evangelize the world. That's the kind of believer I want to be. Despite any adversity, despite whatever is going on around me, I want God to be able to look at me and go, there's somebody I can use. In the midst of all of this craziness, God still has a remnant of people that he is protecting, that he is using to serve his purposes. This is what Revelation chapter 12 says to us. Choose you this day who you'll serve. Remember, I'm pulling for you because we're all in this together. Bye, guys.